All right. Welcome to another Saturday. Moving the stream up a little bit earlier just because of the show schedule. So it's going to be a quick one today. And we're just going to, give a little channel update, talk about the video I just posted a little bit. And also, the upcoming streaming schedule is probably going to alternate a little bit. It's going to go, I've looked at my calendar and it's about every other week I have gigs. So I'll have a show. So I can't do it at 4 because I have to be there at 5 and it takes me about an hour or so to get there. Um so I figured to move it up to 3. I could change it to Sunday, but rather just keep it on Saturday just cuz it's easier for me to know, hey, it's a consistent time, and I'll try to always post for it to let you know when it's going to change. And these streams will just be shorter in general. And you can always go back and watch them too. It doesn't matter whether you see it live or not, other than the interaction part. Um, so I I just uploaded, finally got another video up. Bebopalula. That was fun to make. It was always I always wanted to learn those solos, those Cliff Gallup solos. Finally had an excuse, a reason to, because I've played the song live before, and I always would just improvise the solo and just kind of, whatever, just play a blues pentatonic scale or something like that. But something about that slightly longer delay, which is one thing I did different for this video. Normally I talk about that quick delay. Because the tempo of the song is slower, it's nice to just turn that repeat time down a little bit. So you get, instead of that quick delay, you'll get just a tiny bit longer. I don't know if I can simulate it here for you, but not much longer. Here, like that, kind of. And if the song is really slow, um, and the delay is really quick, it can still work. It can still sound good, but um, it creates this nice swirly washing sound, washy type sound or whatever. If you just have the delay a little bit slower, especially when you get some of these Bigsby things in there, like very very 50s. Cliff Gallup's one of my favorites as far as the original rockabilly stuff. Between Gene Vincent and Eddie Cochran, most people go to those two, and Scotty Moore too, of course. The big three in terms of rockabilly, original rockabilly stuff. And let's see what else. That was yeah, that was a fun video to make. I really enjoyed making the intro part a little bit longer this time. I'm like I've said, I'm working on a sort of a not a documentary series, but sort of a history of series, but it's being treated like a documentary, and that'll be on the Fender Bassman first. This guy right here, one of the whole history of it, not just this model. This model is the piggyback model that came out in '62, I think, and this is a six. I thought it was a '64 for a long time, but it's not. It's a '62. It's a mid '63 actually. The '64 model is over. I'm sorry, the '62 model is here, and the difference is he's just cosmetic. Really, it's like a rough Tolex versus a smooth white Tolex. Otherwise, but they're still the basic same circuitry inside. Anyway, just gonna give you a little bit of an update here on the channel. I also want to thank a couple of people have signed up for Patreon, and I really appreciate that. Um, I know I said, I do like shout outs for people, but unless I get approval that I can shout out, I won't necessarily do it. But you know who you are if you happen to see this stream, and thank you. I appreciate it. And working on getting some, more content for that as well. That will be, behind a little bit behind the scenes and backstage, sort of, so to speak, of the band, and extra little bonus content that will I'll put on the YouTube membership as well as the Patreon membership. It'll be very similar content, and of course, all of the stuff that's on Patreon is the ad free stuff as well. Which, of course, I have zero control over the frequency of the ads or anything like that. I just have control over whether it's monetized or not. But the ads will roll regardless, as they've been on there before the channel was even monetized. So what did I say? I said I'm just giving some basic updates. The next video is just going to be that licks video, which I actually had planned to come out first, but I ran into some technical issues with how I was explaining it and putting it together, and then I really just wanted to do the Bebop video. So um, I wrapped that up first. Next, it'll be that, and then after that, I think I'm gonna. The basement video is just a work in progress that's slowly happening, and it's going to be a long video too. I would, just judging by the size of the script, it's hard to say, but it probably would be over 10 minutes, which is long for my videos. The longest video I have on there, I think, is Mr. Sandman or Too Hip Gotta Go, one of those two. Um, just because of the explanation. The more complex the song, the more you have to explain, the longer it takes, obviously. But this one isn't going to be, the basement video isn't going to really be too much playing. There will be a little bit. And, unfortunately, I don't have access to some of the old vintage amps. Very few people do. Some of the early stuff is hard to find, to be able to, demonstrate the differences between the amplifiers. But this will be more of just the back history of the whole thing, as well as future videos for the history of different rockabilly players and different roots players in general, not just um, the gear itself, but also the artists as well, and the history of where all this music really started from. There's a lot of stuff I feel that doesn't really get talked about too much in some of the documentaries they hear. They can either brush over it real quick, or it's always kind of the same focus, and they don't talk about all of the everything else that was going on at the same time, um, during that era. Um, let's see. That's the update. I also talked about doing the long what is it? The beginner lessons series, which I've got some of the scripts written. Now it's just a matter of time of getting them recorded, getting them up, and that's gonna be the next thing, as well as the podcast. So all of that stuff is in play. It's all working. Next week, that's what I was gonna say. Next week, since I've been putting it off, and I've been asked about it a couple times, I'm going to get another new TeleDynes song up. Because we had taken chances a couple weeks ago, and now I'll have this new song coming out next week. So I just have to finish mixing it, and it should be ready hopefully by the end of next week, and then we'll go from there. And been busy writing some tunes. Got a slow 8 tune, another slow jazzy type, even slower than that. And then we have a really fast a new 2-beat song that's coming out, that's going to have a lot of like stuff like stuff like that. little sort of chicken picking stuff. And the song's it's fun, it's short, it's typical format, but it's just kind of an excuse for me to solo really fast. Got to have at least one of those on the on an album, right? Uh, so yeah, today's just kind of a chill, relaxed thing. Don't have too much going on other than because I got to get ready for the show next week. I want to make a longer. It's going to be um, a little bit longer of a thing. I'll have something more planned out for a little bit of lessons and talk about some other stuff too that I've been going over. One of the things that I've been thinking about for a while is like, and everybody's talking about it, but is the whole AI situation with live with music, and I haven't really looked into it too much, and I've just a tiny bit. But hello, greetings, thanks for joining. Yeah, so I'll be talking. I want to talk a little bit about that. Like I've heard some things like can AI do rockabilly or roots music in general, and I haven't really looked into it too much. And one of the things I was curious about, like, yeah, you can create the sound of it, sort of. I have yet to hear it really duplicate the sound of upright slap bass, though. I haven't heard that yet. Probably out there somewhere. I just haven't heard it. And then you have, is it really duplicating the forms of songs? Like, is it really playing a 1/4? Is it playing a 1/4/5? Is it playing a 2/6/5/1? Is it actually playing proper musical forms, or is it just kind of just a mess of random stuff? Because the stuff I have heard, it doesn't really follow a particular form chord progression. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing when you're writing songs to just stay in a box, but since it's a computer just doing it, I think that when people put the prompts in and if they create their own lyrics for it, then the computer has to work with that to some degree. And if you're not a musician and you don't really understand the flow of how chord progressions work, uh, the computer does the best it can. That's my guess. I don't really know. I haven't looked into it too much. So that's something I want to look into this week and talk about it a little next week, and then go over some more music theory, music approaching how you approach different songs. I actually started working on this um, new song, but a new to me, new for me is well, let me this is it's an old song called Sophronia B by Calvin Booz, and it's a tune we just started doing in the band. We actually did it last night. Had a show last night down in Matunic in Rhode Island, which is the southern end uh, tip of Rhode Island, right on the ocean there, and it was fun, hot. It was quite warm out, but yeah, the crowd had a good time. We had a good time, and we did this song yesterday. It's just kind of a jump blues in A flat, which is not exactly the most conducive key. Guitar players, I don't think it really matters, not to me anyway. So that wait, well, thank you, I appreciate that. I'm not a famous player, but if you think so, I appreciate that. Yeah, so this song is an A flat, and for upright players, that's a bit weird because there's only one place you can play that, really. Well, play it higher note, but um, it's a little tricky. But it's got a typical progression, so it's A. The turnaround is just A flat. Just that's just the main chord you're playing, and the turnaround goes diminished, B flat minor, right? So it's essentially a 2-5-1 or 6-2-5-1, except that instead of the six, instead of playing that, instead of playing the F minor 7, you substitute that with a diminished chord. But you can always do that. Anything can follow the one, uh, which is when you're writing. If you're writing a song or you're playing or adding a substitution chord before you're going into something else, pretty much any chord can follow the one before you're going into whatever chord you're going into. And you just have to decide on what sounds better musically for you. Everybody's heard that before, right? But that's just the turnaround after the verse, after that. And then the bridge is interesting to me. I find that it does this 6, this descending line. And it goes back to, and it keeps going. Then it switches gears. Then it goes back to the 6. Then a dominant 2. Then 5. Back to the 1. So that was fun. That was a fun little song to play. And when you're soloing over something like that, you can just play the notes and the chords, but you can play the different modes as well. So you can have, if you're playing F minor 7, you can just play again, you can just play an A major A major scale over, but just start on the F, right? You're still playing the same pattern. And then when you go to the B flat or whatever, that's, your 2, so you're still playing A flat. And you're back to, you can, back to A flat or whatever. I mean, this is an odd key, granted, but it's still the same idea. You just have to get used. If you're not used to playing an A flat, it can be a little tricky because you most of the rockabilly stuff is in A or E, 50-50, one of the two. And if you're playing something like that, that's probably the hardest part about it, is just being aware of that hey, I'm down a fret than normal. Obviously you could tune down or something, cheat, but and the reason for that, the reason why a lot of those old tunes are in B flat, A flat, E flat, or whatever, is because of the horns. Trumpets are a whole step or a second above the root note. So if you're playing in B flat, they're playing in C. It's easy for them, but the C instruments, piano, guitar, bass, they have to play in B flat for them to play in C. And the tenors are a sixth, and the baries are a sixth up. So if you're playing in B flat, they're playing in G. Then if you're and then of course the tenors are I'm sorry, the altos are a sixth and the baries are a sixth. The tenors are a ninth, which is it's just a second up, an octave higher. So that's the reason why if you go listen to all of those old songs, the reason why they're in all of those old keys. And then when you get to the 50s and things are more guitar oriented, then everything changes and a lot of pop songs are in A and E and D and G and things like that, because those are keys that are more conducive to the guitar. And you can still play all of the, horns over the top of, all of that stuff is just more difficult for the horn players. They have to read like 5 sharps and all of this stuff. If you're an A, they're going to play in B, and they're going to have 5 sharps, and then they're never too happy about that. um, so yeah, I'll show you this chart here real quick, since we're just kind of hanging out. I think I have the right sequence. There we go. So that's essentially what a guitar chart will look like. Oh, this is actually more. This is a bass chart technically, but same difference. If you were reading this in a band, you wouldn't even worry about melody lines unless they had a specific phrasing. Most of that's just going to be slashes, and you're just playing the chords. So you're just right, and that's the opening riff, and then you go into the song. And the only trick with some of this stuff, when you see something like this, there's a diminished chord, there's an augmented chord. Um, you'll see sometimes you'll see diminished seventh or augmented seventh. Well, the main difference is augmented just means the third and the fifth are diminished by are you know are just going to be brought down by a half step, right? When you add that seventh, it's the same thing. The seventh is brought down by a half step. So typically, when you play, you see these diminished chords on the guitar all the time, like this. Let me switch back to the other camera so you can see it. This is a classic one. This, and everybody knows you can move it up and forth, just like the diminished scale itself. Right? Those are great passing chords. And that's the whole scale too. I mean, right there. That's right. It's just 4 notes. So when if you keep going with that, you just end up repeating it in an octave. And when you play the seventh, all this stuff, these or this version, same thing. You can, when you play in a scale over that, when you're soloing over something like that, you want to be sure and be aware of that. You don't have to play a diminished scale necessarily, but if the rest of the band is playing one, somebody else, piano or something, or the bass is, descends down and plays one of the diminished lines and isn't just playing the root, you want to make sure you're playing that diminished scale. So if it's going from back to the root, or wherever you're going from that point, if you're going to whatever chord you're going to, and augmenteds and diminished scales you want to be aware of. But anyway, I was saying that the difference between the seventh chords is really just, technically you're not supposed to play the seventh here. It's just not even here. It's just a triad. It's just a major chord diminished. So the third and the fifth are diminished by a half step. The root stays the same. Same thing with the augmented. It's just up. But when you have the seventh, you're adding the seventh. The seventh is also diminished. It's not. So if they're playing, whatever, let's take D, a simple chord like C. You have C7. Everybody knows C, E, G, right? Those are your notes. When you add the seventh, you add the B flat. So if you were diminishing that, diminish the third, and I can't really do it here. Box myself in a corner there. So there's your diminished. Those are your notes, right? So that's where you have to find another place to play it. So that's why they form it up here. So technically you would just play that. But everybody plays this. Or that's a seventh. That's a diminished seventh because you're playing the A there, which is the B flat. It's down a half step. So technically a C diminished would just be that. Just 3 notes. And you could add a root there. There's your diminished. If you add the A in there, there's the seventh, and you can hear it. Right? And the same thing with the augmented chords. You're just playing the that is a, but the difference here, that would be that's an augmented D. Let's see. It is kind of, it's one of those things you just have to kind of memorize. With the augmented ones, you're not augmenting the seventh. The seventh is on its own, still the seventh. So there's your augmented seventh. This is just a regular augmented. You've heard that before. That's the difference, really. Let's see. I got a question. Some of the strings on 6120 have like here or here, up here. Well, if they've got a vibration up here, if they're buzzing, that could be I think if what you're trying to ask me if it's buzzing up here or if they're vibrating. I mean, typically they shouldn't be. They shouldn't be vibrating at all unless you know, kind of a weird chimey sound. If they are buzzing, it could be a burr in one of the saddle pieces. It also may be you want to check and see the it depends on the guitar really too. Is the bridge in good shape? How old is it? If it's is it a floating bridge? Or is it locked down? Is it a newer Gretsch? If it's one of the newer Gretches, it should be locked down and it's not going to be floating around. If it's too low, that could cause vibration. If it's older, what will happen to bridges over time is it happened to my other one, this one. The bridge had to be replaced because what happens is they're supposed to have a slight bow in them, but they start to break down a little bit, and then they'll start to bow inward, and eventually they just kind of become straight. If you don't replace, eventually they will crack, and you can kind of try to bend them, you know, heat them up even, or people have try to rebend them like in a vise or something like that. But honestly, it's just easier and cheaper to just replace the thing, unless there's some reason like you have a vintage part. I would just keep the part, replace it, put a new one on there. Make sure the action is high enough. If it's buzzing and if it's still buzzing and it's high, it could be a setup issue somewhere else. The neck may not be straight and the maybe the nut's too high. I would check the nut the neck then. Make sure the neck's pretty straight. A little bit of a bow is okay, but not too much. Make sure then check the bridge. Make sure the factory standard setting is 2/32 millimeter on a ruler, right at the 12th fret, 2/32. And if you check all the strings should be the same. It's a new Brian Setzer model. Okay. Um, so it could be that the bridge is too low. It may be the neck is bowed a little bit. I mean, if it's a new Setzer model like a Smoke series or the Hot Rod, then it should be set up pretty well. Um, I've always had pretty good luck, at least with Gretches coming out of the factory. So if it's new, it's definitely not a wearing bridge issue. Although sometimes if it's vibrating a little bit, I do have uh, I've had some issues with saddle burrs. There's also a weird thing in some of not all the Gretches have these. This one does, but the other one doesn't. No, it does. The new bridge has it. The old one didn't have it. There's a little wire that that keeps kind of the pole, the adjusters, the saddle adjusters in place, and it runs around. You can see it right. You guys can't see it, but it runs around the top of these screws right here, and that will. And I really don't know why it's there. I think it's there just so it doesn't get moved and adjusted. It just keeps those screws in place. But sometimes that can get loose, and that can cause a buzz. So you kind of have to look at that. The other thing you can do is like move the string around just a little bit. See if you get like I mean, the saddle piece should move a little bit. That's normal, but the string itself shouldn't slide too much. This one had an issue. It still kind of does. I don't really hear it when it's amplified, but when you're clicking, you hear like click, 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 click in the string in the saddle. That shouldn't happen. That means there's probably some sort of saddle burr if it's doing that. It's not smoothed out inside there. Um, Another thing too, see if you're hearing it when it's amplified too, because that's the biggest concern. If it's just doing it acoustically and you play it amplified and you don't hear it, um, it's probably not that big of a deal. The other thing, what is it? The original strings, the strings that came on the guitar, because if you changed like to 11s or something like that, and they're not slotted properly for a thicker string, that can also cause an issue. Um, or a thinner string. If it's a thinner string, that can cause an issue. I think typically they put tens on. I don't know what brand, but I usually end up changing the strings. I think I changed mine pretty much right away. Um, that's typically what I've run into when I hear buzzing or vibrations above above that. I mean, the Gretches are they're lively guitars, and they definitely have a yeah, with the amp it's no problem. Okay, so you're probably fine. I mean, looking at my bridge here, it's a little slanted here. Um, that's the other thing too. As you put pressure on the saddle, it can slowly bend backwards. So you got to be careful of that. It can bend the wood, especially if it's up too high. Um, no, it's all right. Um, no, I think I understand the question there. Yeah, if it's okay through the amp, I wouldn't worry about it too much. I know that when you're playing acoustically, it's it can be annoying because this one does it. The orange one here does it. When I'm playing it, I can hear little clicks and vibrations and things. But then when I go to play it, it's like I don't hear it at all. So when I worked in a guitar shop, I always say, "Oh, there's certain things you can do to fix it," and it's hard to say, not hearing it, seeing it, obviously, but they are they are gonna. I mean, the whole thing's gonna vibrate and resonate on you, that as it should. But I mean, these strings up here, if I play these up here, not that you would ever do this, but um, they they really ring out on this guitar, but the other ones don't. Can't hear really anything, even amplified. You can't hear it, but this one, it's just chimey. Yeah. Yeah, I would just check the bridge and see how it is. Check the neck too. I mean, it should be good, but if you can sight better, you know, I use put the guitar like this, sight down the neck. I know it's kind of awkward looking at the way I'm doing it, but you check each side. The bridge, the bass side, the treble side should be pretty straight. If it's okay to have a little bit of a bow, but you want to keep focusing and looking here, look look here, look here, look here. The older the guitar, over time, naturally, these where the neck meets the body, it's going to dip down and sink into the body. Same with acoustics. Does They all do the same thing? Uh, that's normal. That's going to happen no matter what. And eventually, they do a neck reset, but that's you know decades away if it's brand new. Um, the way they built them today is so much better than the way they used to build them. So it might, we'll see. We'll see what happens down the road. But um, yeah, I've only adjusted this neck once, and the Phoenix maybe once or twice over the years that I've had it, and I haven't had this one very long, maybe 5 6 years, but the Phoenix I've had for almost 20 years, 20 years. This No, not quite, like 18 years, but still, I've only adjusted it twice over that time, and man, it neck is just amazing, and it's straight. If it's bowed or whatever, and whatever side is straight, even if you see one side, hey, there's a little curve on one side, but straight on the other, you're good. You can't. There's not really much you can do about that except do a fret. They call it a grind and polish, a G and P, or a fret dress, where you um, take the take a little bit of the fret material off to kind of smooth and level everything out. So so even though the neck is a railroad track, it's still the frets are even. So then you recrown them, and that solves all the other issues over time as the frets wear. Then you have to have a refret. Then they can plane the neck down, and then refret it, and then you're good to go. Um, Humidificate, depending on where you live, humidification is a big thing with these guitars. If you live in an area where it gets really cold and it dries out, make sure you're humidifying it. If you're in an area, if it's really humid all the time, possibly dehumidification, but not too much. You want to have a healthy, a pretty decent balance of it. Um, don't leave it in an area where it's super hot, like an attic or something like that. That will just destroy the guitar. Um, that's really about it. But yeah, if you do happen to see a bow on both sides, it probably needs a neck adjustment. So you get the truss, if you're using a Gretsch, it's easy. Take you know, this, why am I blanking on this? The cover, the truss rod cover, and just take that off and then adjust it. And if you're sitting with a guitar this way, pulling the rod towards you, tightens it, putting it down away from you, loosens it. So, so right, left, right, loose. Yeah. Righty tighty, lefty loosey, as they say. And you can also check. This is another trick. Um, Index finger on the low G string, like your thumb on your right hand. on the high, on the octave, the G string, and then kind of, it's a little bit of a stretch, but you're kind of tapping the 7th fret. So you're depressing the third string and the 15th, third fret and the 15th fret on the low E, and then you're tapping the 7th fret. And what you're looking for is a tiny, just a little bit of a bounce, just a little bit of the tiniest amount, right? If you see a lot, the neck's probably not straight. It kind of works. You're kind of using this as a straight edge, is what you're doing. And then if it's not bouncing at all, then the neck is too bowed up, and you need to loosen it. So, and then you can do the same thing here on the high strings. And you can check each string like this if you want to see if this one's pretty good, but it it can help you see if the neck is twisted or bowed or arced or whatever. And then you just make the adjustments from there with the truss rod. And that's your first step in setting up a guitar. And then the next thing you check is the bridge, get the height set right, make sure that's good, and then check the nut. Get the nut height good. I always like to make sure that the same amount of pressure, takes a little while to get used to, but the same amount of pressure from the 2nd fret to the 1st fret. So you're playing a note, it should be the same amount of pressure roughly between these 2 frets. If you have to press down harder for the 1st fret versus the if you have to press down harder for the 1st fret than you do the 2nd fret, then it's probably too high. Another thing you can do is you can use a pick's thickness as well. Kind of push down on the 1st fret and then the 2nd fret, slide it in there and see if it's there. If it's, you know, obvious. And the reason why you do this last is because you have to make sure the neck is straight. Because if you start messing with this before you've adjusted anything else, and then you go to adjust the neck, this you might end up trimming this down a little too much, and then your frets are laying flat across the fingerboard. And then you have to go through the process of raising the individual slots up. And that's another thing you can do. If you need to, you can always, you can take, I recommend, there's a website called Stu Mac. They have all the parts and all the repair tools that you need for a guitar. Some of it's a little pricey, but to do basic setup stuff, I think they have like a package deal now. I haven't ordered from them in years, but I have everything now. But and the stuff lasts for a long time, forever. You know, the only thing you have to really get is glue. The super glue, they make a 10 ultra thin, very thin liquid super glue. That you just what you do is you take baking soda and tape off the top here, so you keep the guitar clean. Tape it off here. Put some like painter's tape, like blue low tack tape, here and here right against the bridge. So the only thing exposed is the nut. And you take the string off. Keep the tension. Keep the strings on. Don't take the strings off. Bring the nut, the string off, and then take some baking soda and pour it right in the slot, and then put the string back on. That packs it down in there. And then you kind of blow off or brush off the excess, take it back off, and that's when you take the super glue and you just put a little dab, just enough to kind of let it seal in, right? And then if there's too much, try to wipe it off. If it does harden, you can always take a razor blade and kind of score it and scrape it off. Another thing you can, and then they make accelerator spray. If anybody's familiar with that, you can just, because otherwise it would take about 24 hours to cure. Well, you don't want to wait that long. You want to get it done quickly. So just take the accelerator spray, spray it. Again, take the string off. The string's still off at this point. You put the super glue in there, hit it with the accelerator, and it'll harden in like a few seconds. And then then you have to that basically filled the nut in completely. So now you have to take your file and file it back down. So this is what guitar shops usually do if you have to fix the bridge, if they unless the nut is really bad or it's cracked or it's really worn. If it's just one or two um, strings that are buzzing, that's what they'll do. They'll just fix the individual nut, and that'll last you for years um, if it's done properly. Sometimes, depending on the material, when you go to change the strings, the clump of glue and baking soda kind of breaks off, so you have to redo it. It's a good trick to learn. If you're at a gig, the one thing that always helped me just to get through the gig, if the guitar starts buzzing on you or something happens, um, take a business card or a piece of paper and just fold it over and stick it underneath the string, and that lifts it up just enough to get you through the show, and it won't buzz. little little tricks. I had to do that a couple of times, especially with I just left the paper in there for months because I didn't want to bother taking it to get. I didn't know what I was doing at the time. This was years ago, and I just left it in there because I didn't want to bother taking it to someone to get the guitar fixed properly. Um, yeah, these old Setzer models from the 90s. They decided to put a They wanted to put a graphite nut in these things, which is a terrible idea because that's such a soft material, and as you use a Bigsby, it acts like a saw blade. So it just saws down, and then after a few months of playing, boop, flat against the fingerboard. And if you look at some old photos of the original Setzer models, you'll see the black nut, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Um, oh, yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, there's so many different things to learn about the guitars as far as setup goes. Gretches, they're so much better than they used to be. That's how I kind of learned a lot, is having older Gretches that would break down all the time and have to figure out how to get them working. Because I really wanted to play it. I could have just played a Fender or whatever, but I really liked the feel of the big hollow body guitar. I didn't want to just play, you know, even though I love Tellys, and all of that, and Gibsons too. I had a Gibson for a long time, but I started playing on acoustic, and I got used to holding the big guitar, playing all these chords and everything. And so having a Gretsch, it's just much more comfortable. Um, yeah, here's another guitar tip. I know it's a lot, I'm throwing a lot at everybody, but things that tend to happen is the well, a couple things really. First, the strap locks, especially this one right here. This one's to be this one's been good. I've knock on wood, this one's been pretty good. I haven't had too many issues with it, but this one, for whatever reason, just the angle of it tends to get loose, and you can tighten it up with a screwdriver, but you want to be aware of that. Um, Also, when you take the strings off to reset, this is for any guitar, not just Gretches. This has the locking tuning pegs, which I believe the Setzer model is the same. Um, Check and make sure. This can also affect your tuning. Um, there's little screws on the top on the top here. Make sure they're tight, not too tight, but just at least hand tight. You don't want to overdo it, but just a little bit. And then these nuts right here on the individual tuning pegs. When you take the strings off, check them, and check them with like a wrench or a socket or something, and just tighten it a little bit and see if it's loose. A lot of the times when they come from the factory, um, especially Gibsons and Fenders, not necessarily. I don't know if the Gretches have had them or not, but I've seen it happen. It's not necessarily the case with every guitar, but I would just check that because that's one of the things you want to check, especially on new guitars, because if they're loose, the string can slowly start to, like, why is it not staying in tune? It could be that, and so it's just all those little things to keep in mind. Also, of course, the nut the jack. Make sure this is tight. Make sure this is tight. The way you can keep that tight, if you look down in the if in a Gretsch at least, if you look down in the F hole, you can see the jack, and you can take your finger. Something there. You can take your finger and just kind of like put it inside the guitar, um, to hold the jack there, and then you can tighten it with a wrench or whatever. Um, just to keep it, because otherwise it could just spin, and you don't want to spin it too much; it might break the wires inside. So you just got to be a little bit careful. With Fenders and Gibsons, there's usually a back plate cover that you can take off and get to it. And yeah, those are the main tips that I've always checked. If you're uh, filing the frets down, make sure there's no sharp edges and stuff like that. Again, that's more of a feel thing and a cosmetic issue, but it's that's just all the little tricks and things I've learned over the years, and between working in the guitar shops and just playing in general. I'm sure I'll come up with something later. The other thing you can do is, I believe, I can't remember the exact dimensions, but with the new Gretches, again, they're set up really, really well, so you don't have to worry about it too much. But the individual pole pieces you can adjust. I wouldn't bring them up too much. So the way you want to adjust it is like, I want to say like 3 or 4 30 seconds, or 3 or 4 30 seconds from the top of the string. So how you adjust those pole pieces, especially if you have an older one, um, push the strings down right here at the end of the neck, and then look and take a ruler and see and make sure they're all kind of even, and that's how you would adjust those. See what how height you would take. Um, do I take them all off? I I've gone back. I usually take them all off because that way I can clean the fingerboard basically. I usually use Dr. Ducks or just a lemon oil or something. Every not every time I change the strings, but every other time or so. So I take them all off and I go through and just kind of moisturize the neck here. That's so you got to kind of take them all off to do that. And it's just easy to just with the locking tuners. It's easy to just undo real quick. Take them all off and wrap them all. It doesn't it doesn't really matter. I mean, if you're only changing if you, it doesn't really matter. I just like to condition it every couple. Just take a look and see how much you've been. How what it's doing, especially in the wintertime when it's dry. Then you want to take every time I change the strings, I do that because I make sure the neck is moisturized and it doesn't crack or anything on me. Um, yeah, that's that's the that's my opinion on changing strings anyway. It's just that's the reason why I would do it. And if I have to adjust the neck, if you adjust the neck, do it with obviously you do it with string tension. Don't make sure the strings tune it up, make sure it's in tune, then check the neck and adjust it. And that's when you would do that. And if you want to be adventurous and learn to do the fret dress part, same deal. Make sure that the strings are up to tension. You've tightened the neck. You've got that set up first. Then take the strings off. Then do the work. Even though the tension the neck's going to come up because you're not putting string tension on it anymore. But that's where you want to file it based on that tension, not a lower tension. Same thing if that's why when they do neck planing, when they do refrets, um, you don't have to do it, but a lot of guitar shops will have a neck jig and they'll put it. It simulates string tension. You can set the guitar on there, and that's why they plane the neck down. And guitars do have a lifespan, so they, if you keep playing them all the time, eventually as you replace the frets, it's going to eat more of the wood up, and you're going to have to plane it down, and eventually there's just not enough, there's no more wood left, right? So you have to, with a Tele, you could put a new neck on, but with a Gretsch, I mean, I guess you could put a new neck on, but I mean, at that point, it's better off to just get a new guitar. All right. Well, so I'm having fun, but unfortunately, I have to split because I have the show, so I got to get loaded up and head out down to Newport, Rhode Island. It's about roughly 45 minutes from where I live, so I got a gig from 6 to 9 down there, and then yeah, I'll be back. We'll be back live stream next week. Try to have a more concise, thought out show for you guys and talk about different styles. And again, maybe touch on the AI thing a little bit. It's always been interesting to me. Like, sure, it can duplicate pop stuff, but can it do the root stuff really effectively? Right? I don't know. I'm not really worried about it because I think most people kind of know, getting to the point where they know, hey, this isn't real. And most of the AI stuff at this point has just been used for like joke songs and silly stuff. So um, I think for this stuff, it's definitely going to be more, always going to be human. The human element's always going to be there. Anyway, thank you guys again for hanging out, and I will see you guys next week at 4 o'clock. Just had to move it up today because of the show, and I will hopefully have at least either a new Teledyne song out by next week, or another, or maybe both, that new video just on different licks and riffs and ideas for soloing. All right. That's always a fun one. All right. Thank you guys again. I got to go. I will see you guys next week. Have a good one, everybody.